Morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's session on Leveling Up with Hybrid Work 2.0. Got two speakers. Got Brendan O'Neill, the Director of Partner and Channel Strategy at Robin. Brendan helps to grow distribution and develop strategic partnerships to the organization. He was part of the original team that started Robin as the first go-to-market lead. Craig Durr is the Senior Analyst at Wayne House. Craig provides research and analysis related to market sizing and forecasts and service evaluations, products, market trends, and end user and buyer expectations. Let him go.
Thank you so much. I had to get a picture, sorry. Thank you.
Morning, everybody.
Are you on?
I think I am. I'm on, right? I'm loud anyway. So
Okay.
It might be hard to tell. Nice. Well, thank you all for joining us. Hopefully everyone's tennis elbows recovered from spin last night. Right? I saw some people out there that were really giving it their all. So some of those faces are in this room. So today, super excited to have this conversation. I've been working with Craig over the course of the summer on collecting this report that we've been putting together into an ebook, and there's been a ton of great learnings. The goal of today's session is to walk through a lot of those learnings with everyone here. We're going to have five frameworks or a framework and 5 takeaways at the end. There's also going to be time for Q&A, including you dialing in from home. And so if you have any questions, feel free to jot them down, and we'll be taking those at the end. But I'll hand it over to Craig, the star of the show.
I appreciate that. So if I haven't met you, my name is Craig Durr. I work for a company called Wayne House Research. We're kind of a niche analyst and research firm, but we focus on what we call enterprise communications. So you can think of the services, the devices, the technologies that enable businesses to communicate and collaborate. And in the last several years, we were in a great space to expand that and talk about what not took place only in group settings, but in office settings as well too. And so that's what's brought us to this conversation here. So for context, I want to try and understand, as I share this information, who is on, I'm going to call the client side, who's a consumer of these type of products and are implementing them at home by show of hands? And then who's kind of in servitude to those clients as sales or products or consultants? Who's working on that area as well too? Okay, so this information was written and geared towards the end users, those IT decision makers. But for you that are in servitude of those IT decision makers, steal this, borrow it, grab anything you want from this. There's great data here, use your own voice and twist it, because I think what we came up with was some good information to help people. And we kind of organize it like this. A lot of people have implemented what they would call hybrid work, and we're going to categorize that and call that 1.0. And there's a lot of learnings that people have, and how do we get them to move to that next level of enablement? And we're going to call it hybrid 2.0. So we're going to brand it 2.0 also. So you first heard it here is what we're going to say, okay? So, I mean, the key that we were trying to deal with here was trying to get people back in the office, right? And there's some aha moments here. And one of the first things that we realized is, you know, a lot of people thought this was about simple tasks. This was about desk and conference room scheduling and application. And the key takeaway the theme that comes through this is it's about experience. And for people to move from what they thought they were doing as hybrid work and successfully transition to something that was fluid, dynamic, that had longevity, they had to focus on the experience. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those key conversations that we had along the way, right?
Absolutely. The reservation side of things really felt like applying resource management to an office that we all left.
Yeah,
and people
exactly.
thought that was kind of hybrid work. And it's clear now, and especially after all the sessions throughout yesterday and this morning, that there really needs to evolve and change when it comes to connecting the people element and really aligning it to the organization's goals of being a hybrid organization.
Yeah,
it's more of a strategy than it is a practice.
Good. So we've been inundated with all this great information here. And so when Brendan and I were trying to formulate what we wanted to have takeaways here is hopefully what we can do is help you package everything we talked about in the last day and a half and take it forward. I want to share with you a framework that we've used. This is something we implemented back in 2018, 2019, which is how we were trying to help our clients and our customers talk to their clients and customers about what they were doing in the office. We called it the 3 W's. And if you look at this, you'll realize that this resonates with themes that you've heard today. This worked well for us because it helped not to boil the ocean. It gave everyone 3 different areas to think about as they're trying to visualize hybrid work, or originally it was visualizing the modern work experience. We're talking about the workforce, talking about the workplace, and we're talking about workflows. Who's working, where are they working, and what are they trying to get done? What's the work being done? So you'll see hints and allegations of this framework throughout this work and in the ebook itself too. But this is a great one. This is picture worthy. Take the picture and bring that back home, because if anything, as you're having those conversations with your advocates, this is a great way to help put this into buckets so that they can absorb this overwhelming topic of hybrid work.
Yeah, I think overwhelming is the key. Also the 3 W's, that means I'll never forget it, right? So it makes it easy to incorporate into conversations, and when you're talking across business leaders, you can still tie together each of their individual focuses to the greater strategy of that 3W framework. So it made it really easy to have those conversations.
You're right. So we've all been talking about new stakeholders in the hybrid world, right? Think about what we're looking at. Workforce can be HR. Workplace can be facilities, corporate real estate, and workflows winds up being the domain of IT. Here's a great way to help talk to these different stakeholders and how they can integrate and work together in trying to achieve something here. So, keep moving forward. So, I wanted to give you a quick overview of the research we did that underpinned this ebook. This is slide heavy. This is a little bit more of proof that we actually did some work for you. So Sandy, I hope you can appreciate this as a fellow researcher. And the other thing also too is to give you context what's going on. So we embarked on a 2-tier research plan to help try and understand what do people need to do to get to a successful level of hybrid work 2.0. We did a course of in-depth interviews where we spoke to a core audience, which is often the orange box. We call them the line of business line of business leaders, LOB leaders. Sometimes people call them frontline workers, but that gets confused, frontline leaders, with frontline workers or information workers. So we call it line of business leaders. These are people that worked in large companies, 1,000 or more. They managed people, or they managed people who managed people. So they had to implement hybrid work. There might have been a directive from some C-level suite that came down and said, we're going to do a 3-2 plan, we're going to do a 2-3 plan. They're where the rubber hit the road, where they had teams that they had to actually make functional, and make productive in a hybrid work environment. This actually aligns a lot with what Raj said in his keynote, right? Taking that element and bringing it to the team level as opposed from a C-level directive or an individual decision point as well too.
It applies a lot of the context, because who better to know what their team needs than the line of business leaders as well. So it's all about applying the context of more of a guideline than making it a policy.
Exactly. So we first did in-depth interviews where we talked to people both in the United Kingdom and the United States and tried to understand some of their key concerns and inhibitors. That formed hypotheses that we then took to an online survey that was a blind survey that was US based. Some of the other key elements, we made sure these people were working in a hybrid work environment, that they were familiar with what we call workplace experience platforms. That's how we categorize Robin as a workplace experience platform. And that they were already utilizing shared spaces such as desk or offices or conference rooms or what have you. Now this is another eye chart, which is unfortunate. But this wanted to give you some insights in terms of the diversity of who we spoke to when we did some of these in-depth interviews. These are people that managed anywhere from 400 people to 15 people. You can see the variety of hybrid work experiences they had, where they were fully remote with 29 people hybrid in the office on a 2 to 3 day week basis. All were hybrid driven by HR, but at the discretion of the managers. Other ones had people requesting 2 to 3 days off in the office, but the manager's discretion to approve. So you can see the diversity of what their interpretation of hybrid was.
And I think that reflects a lot of more of these conversations, as we've heard directly from like Robin customers on a panel yesterday, how much variety there is within that gray space of 100% remote or the 2019 model of everyone in the office.
Right.
There is a billion ways to make hybrid as far as how it is done in practice.
Right.
And so how do you support that, and how do you move the organization forward knowing that there's such a slew of ways people are going to approach it?
Yeah. You know, another interesting thing came up is we asked for people with a familiarity of these type of platforms. And there was a very rich list in these 6 examples that I'm showing you here right now, including Robin, including some other platforms. But what was interesting is that people maybe knew about it and may not have been implementing it. They knew hints and allegations of it, and they didn't fully implement it. Or more likely, they've only scraped the very beginning of what that platform can do, right? Like I said before, it doesn't stop with desk reservations and conference room reservations, but that's the insight that most people had, is that that's the program I use to schedule my meeting, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
So let's look at some of the key wow moments. All this does is probably reinforce things that everyone here knows because you're already deep into this conference right now. But these are some of the stats that came up in this pool of research, right? The majority of people were in the process of doing their post-pandemic work plans. They were implementing their come back to the office plan. What was interesting is that about 44% of these were actually doing something completely new. It was not what they did in the 2019 office like you talked about, right?
Yeah.
It's like stepping into a time machine and that shirt's no longer in fashion when you come back. Now, what was still interesting is that there was a lot of flux. A large percentage, 70%, 2/3 thought, look, I still have changes coming. And even more so, they thought that meant there was going to be more time in the office. Now, keep in mind, this is line of business leaders. This isn't C-level executives that say, I know what our plan is. These are people that believe they're being told what to do. This is their understanding from their directives, or if they don't have a directive from above, this is their interpretation of what they have going on. So you can see the level of confusion, of influx, of change taking place where the rubber hits the road. And that's an important thing to think about here.
Yeah, and also, again, that context and clarity for saying,
Yeah.
we know that C-level says we want people back, but what does that mean across each team?
Yeah.
Type of work, things like that. Gets a little ambiguous.
You know, this is funny. I'm totally going off script on him here, so he's gonna hate me doing this here. There's a great way to think about this. We as technologists, as people working in this industry or thinking about it within our company, we're that 20%. We're the ones that are technology savvy, that probably have adopted this in our own lifestyle. There are groups out there, there's another 80% of the world that hasn't adopted this as of yet. I'm fortunate that I'm staying right here, and I open up my window and I'm looking at that 80%. They have cubicles that I'm looking at. They had an executive office that had a circular table. I was like a sociologist studying, sitting there taking notes of what I saw taking place at this office building. And it wasn't like the waterfront where you go around the corner and it's got the beautiful benching desktops and the open warehouse space. That is the 80%. That is the insurance industry in Hartford. That is that mortgage industry in Kansas City. They haven't gotten to this level of updating their offices as of yet, and that's who we're trying to convince there. And that was a lot of what we saw here, right? Mm-hmm. That wasn't that bad off script, was it?
No, that was great.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. So this was done over the course of this summer. I guess we initiated it in
late
July.
Summer. Yeah,
June, July, August. Okay, so here is some key takeaways of why these people cited their implementation was failing. This is what was causing them pain points. I kind of alluded to this already, but here's 3 of them, right? The first thing is people stopped at just the reservation aspect of whatever they thought that was. They stopped at meeting room reservation scheduling. Shared desk scheduling was probably the new advancement that really took place. And that was it. They used a scheduling tool beyond Outlook, beyond what maybe Microsoft did. And that was probably their implementation of Hybrid Work 1.0. You've mentioned you saw that a lot where people are just very scraping the platform, right?
Yeah, just applying that Band-Aid onto it would be in a open office with a sea of desks.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, well, we're missing the mark a little bit. It doesn't really apply to how people want to use the space anymore. So again, the quick adjustment was making it more of an index of space or resource heavy.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that that's not what's going to drive actual usage or growth within how people use their workplaces.
Right. The next one was, and this was pretty classic, that they approached this as one and done, that it was a singular event. We're coming back to the office September 6th. Welcome back. We're here. This is your hybrid work office, and that's it. And so that was one of the other key failure points that we saw when people said it's one and done. We did hybrid work. Why aren't you back in the office? We did this. And this was kind of an uneducated, not forward-thinking approach to what we saw, which was a common downfall, unfortunately.
I think you also saw it with the teams that would hold out as long as possible to make
Yeah.
that one shift. I think I think, Ori, you'd mentioned it on your panel yesterday about having to continuously revisit, speak with the stakeholders at the organization, see how people are using the space, make adjustments. That transparency allows people to evolve, and I think that's a theme that we really heard through a lot of these interviews and the research, where if you have the transparency and the approach of saying this is an iterative and an evolution, hence the 1.0 to 2.0, just knowing that it's never really done, one of the shortfalls was approaching it as we'll make these 2 or 3 big changes, we're going to cut the ribbon, everyone's going to be charging back, they can't wait to reserve a desk.
Taco
right?
Tuesday, come on in.
Hey. Yeah, so it was the easy way out. So I think that's kind of the theme that we heard.
Yeah, Wall Street Journal cited the number one reason people came back into the office was for a free meal.
I believe it.
Taco Tuesday, up here. Yeah, okay. Here's the last one also. And this was actually us kind of reading between the lines, is that they didn't update metrics. They were still in the 2019 mode, that people were still looking at the data around their office, their utilization in that framework and through that lens. And more importantly, they actually kept that information to the stakeholders that had it before. They kept it siloed. A lot of times that data was limited to where it was kept at corporate real estate or maybe IT. One of the key takeaways and one of the key learnings we heard is line of business leaders, they can act upon that information. But to roll this back before getting to the punchline of the research here, these are some of the key indicators. And if as a customer you're seeing this or as your clients are seeing this is a great way to talk to them, like saying, you know what, I think I can help take you to this next level, right? Okay. So we did, in the course of this research, observe some best practices, and we tried to categorize them. We captured 4 here, and then we'll bring this down to some more practical steps. But here are some of those best practices as we talk to people that we felt were doing the correct thing moving forward. So the very first thing is the idea that people accepted that the experience mattered. And this is not just what takes place when you're in the office. One of the most powerful examples we had, and I think we quoted this person in the ebook, was they were thinking about the experience before that person ever left. How they were communicating back to the office, what was taking place. How do I know Brendan's going to be in? How do I let IT know that I need a desk by reserving it? All that experience, was it smooth and fluid? It was a lot about removing friction in this process.
Yeah, and extending I think it was during the panel yesterday with JLL, the idea of your workplace experience does not begin and end at the doorway either anymore. It's extending beyond, it's the whole day. What is your work experience and where it happens, and how does that journey start? So extending that experience beyond those 4 walls has been really important. And that's really what is the big unlock for a lot of people.
And you know, it's actually really interesting that you mentioned that. It goes beyond just your employees. If your customers are dealing with a lot of visitors, that hybrid experience applies to them as well too, right? A lot of these lobbies no longer have manned desks taking place there. You're now dealing with something like a virtual kiosk, with something that we saw. How are those people checking in? How are they finding the people they need to get in touch with? How are they being prompted on the back end? Hey Brendan, you got a visitor in the lobby. How's that take place? All that experience between your employees, your customers, your visitors matter in that process. All right, the next one that we saw, which I think we all alluded to, was you have to make the implementation iterative. It has to be something that continues to evolve and move forward. Again, this is the opposite of one and done. This is the idea that people we saw that were doing this well were learning and adapting along the way.
Absolutely, and one of the questions that I keep asking people, that even on the floor, so I apologize if I've asked you this directly already, is how are you refreshing those KPIs, and what are you thinking as far as how long is too long to wait to revisit and to look at the data, and how long is too short? 2-week stint,
right?
2-quarter stint. So I think everyone's starting to calibrate how they're absorbing that information so that they can start to give themselves those benchmarks internally, so that they can succeed.
Perfect. The next one, which is actually a great delivery segue into that, is deliver the data and the insights to the front line. So when there were tools and platforms that allowed these line of business managers to understand what was taking place with their teams, they were able to act and adjust accordingly. Big statement. I can see that my team's coming in on Tuesdays. Why are they coming on Tuesdays? Well, that's when I have my staff meeting. I see no one has come in the last week. Why is that? Well, I can talk to them and realize that we had a sales conference or something like that. There's information that frontline manager can implement and work upon, and it allows them to adjust their plan. Raj made a great example here when he talked about his 25%, 25-25 rule. The way that I've talked about this to clients is, you want to talk about hybrid work, don't think just in terms of context of a week. Allow that team to define what that time period is for them to adjust. So in this context, delivering that insights, what I'm trying to say is that managers may say, hey, you know what, I'm a sales-centric team. I'm only going to have people in, my 25% is going to be through the course of the month. And like that was suggested in one of the keynotes, make it those 3 or 4 days be an offsite or an onsite where everyone comes in and does that. So delivering the insights was a key indicator of some of the best practices that we saw. And then the last one was, again, having this all unified through a common platform. This is totally legitimate. This is beyond the fact that Robin was a cohort in this research. The fact that you have all these different stakeholders now that transcend from IT, you have HR, you have CRE and facilities also taking place. If there was a common dashboard, a common way for people to access information and for it to be managed so that they could see what's going on and then disseminate that through the company. This was a best practice. You couldn't have disparate tools and a patchwork of information, because it goes back to that first statement, which is experience matters. And if people don't have a good experience, they can't make it work.
Yeah, the common language, common numbers, and common tools, that makes it a lot easier to have those cross-team conversations, and it makes it even easier to push that message upstairs too for the C-suite, to showcase that things are actually moving in the right direction.
You're right, and that's actually one of those, we're starting to get down to some of the practical advice here. And the very first thing that aligns to these best practices is the idea of changing the perspective. It's a simple idea, but one of the common downfalls was that a lot of these organizations viewed hybrid work as a key initiative that went under the C-suite, along with the other 4 or 5 key initiatives for that year. We're going to hit 35% growth target. We're going to, expand in Asia Pacific, and we're going to implement hybrid work. Hybrid work in itself shouldn't be approached as the destination, but as part of the journey and part of the tool. There's some really great panels on the life side, which deals with a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion, corporate responsibility and social responsibility. This is just an example how to do this. I mean, if your corporate goal is things like driving corporate culture, hybrid work can support reasons for employees to connect to your brand or mission. Why are they coming in? This is culture. This could be its own webinar for 3 days. Culture is dead. Long live culture. It's in transition, and we all are trying to redefine what that means right now. Here's another one. If your C-level suite goal is increased productivity, if it's around the idea of increasing employee satisfaction or loyalty, this is a great way to, hybrid work is a great way to support a new style of management. Think about that other 80%. They measure people by butts and seats. What happened if they had the chance to do something like management by objective or KPIs? Hybrid work creates the opportunity for them to transition to something that might align to more of a productivity gain tool as well. I talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually it was cited before in the keynote. This is where we bring all this great information together. Is the idea that you get to expand your employment pool. You have the ability now to hire in other geographical locations, hire work from home people that may have childcare that they're working with as well, part-time employees or people that are working on a schedule that's taking place as well. Breakthrough benefits. If you're trying to figure out what really works within organizations to really attract and retain employees, you can approach different work styles. You can allow people to really define how, when, and where they work. And that's a great enabler of some loyalty to your company. And then also learning and development. So if you have an HR-centric goal that's, I want to make sure my teams are evolving, that they're learning, that they're developing themselves, hybrid work is an enabler to do things like I can have people time shift. I can have people work and at the same time also educate themselves. They might be going back to a school program at the same time still contributing to our corporate business. They don't need to take off or just do night classes or something like that. It allows for more learning and growth development. So this was key. This is that best practices starting coming in and educating the C-suite, they're not dumb, but educating them that hybrid work is a destination. It's not the destination. It is a tool. It's part of the journey along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just changing the perspective and saying, how can you take advantage of this new flexibility given the organization's goal?
Right.
Organization's goal.
Right. So I put up this image here. This is how we were talking to people about workplace experience platforms. We're here right now through the kindness of Robin, and Robin has this in place. But this is a Maslow hierarchy of kind of allowing you to understand where people can add on additional functionality and get to that experiential idea. There is foundational information. It does start with reservation information and room and desk, shared group spaces, personal spaces, because that information allows you to start having some basic functionality like finding coworkers, space assignment, and policy management, things along the way like that. Then you get to the analytics and insights and the forecast and demand and measuring utilization. And I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. I have something built on that. But then you also start thinking about the functionality around employee and visitor check-in and management. Not only are you allowing people to reserve a space, but how do I know they're here? How do I know what's going on in terms of getting them around the space? If I have entry requirements, how can I make that frictionless in terms of uploading COVID immunizations or other medical information, what have you? There's actually some elements of this still taking place in Australia. We have to kind of still provide medical proof before entering certain buildings in that area. Notify hosts and visitors. And then probably the last one that's just really powerful when you get into a very expanded opportunity is how can you communicate to these employees in the context of where they are in space. And there's a couple of ways to do this. There's group-centric communication, digital signage. So when this room's down, this will probably have information saying, hey, look, there's a great free lunch taking place right around the corner. Go check it out. It only matters to you because you're here in the building. But there's also the ability in context for me to communicate to individuals. Hey, I can see that Brendan's here on site, and then therefore I can tell him, hey, I've got your basketball that I borrowed before. I'm going to return it to you. So it's whatever it is. But there's other context, site-specific context. We're going to have a fire alarm at 10 o'clock today. Why do I want to communicate to the entire team that's taking place? But I just want to do this group of people that are here on site and understand what's taking place. So as an experiential platform, this helps to illustrate how you can add richness and it builds upon each other. And this is one of those key aha moments when we were talking to the executives, those IT buyers in the process as well too, to say, look, you can take this further and further. And this was a great example of people building upon this as well as some of the best practices.
Yeah, I'm a visual learner, so this is what's also helped me because you think of these cloud of problems and there's different angles that teams are coming at it from. And if you're not thinking of it first as hybrid work as a tool and as a organizational strategy, and then the second is how do you apply that across these different business leaders and these different departments and things like that, it can get really gnarly on trying to unpack and say, how do I even move the ball forward? You kind of feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place and it feels kind of impossible. So some of these frameworks and having them build upon each other really makes it easy to talk across each of these departments so that you can progress and start to improve.
That's a great point. I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. That way stakeholders can wind up seeing where their value is, and once you get their buy-in, they're implementing it behind that. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's a good idea. Let me expand on this analytics and insights. So I added this slide last night to his dismay, because there's a lot of information here talking about data, and I wanted people to have context. Well, what do you mean? Like, okay, data, how do I can process it? Data helps if you're mapping it to the business needs. And again, I'm going to use that Maslow hierarchy term, but you have the ability to build out what you need based upon some of those things. So you might start off with very basic up top here. It says tracking efficiency and vacancy. And you'll deal with stuff like space designation, capacity planning, area planning. This is very much the realm of corporate real estate. Maybe you want to understand the cause and effect that's taking place. So you start adding cost in per seat. Then you want to start understanding the measurements of effectiveness. At this point in time, you can look at desk and space reservations and utilization. So now we're trying to get into how are people actually effectively using this space as we're providing it to them? Do we have too much? Do we have not enough? John, your CFO gave me a great story last night. He said he realized when he was looking at the data from utilization, there was only 3 times a year that your office was at max utilization, that every seat was taking place. And I think they made a decision around that. They said, you know what, we can reduce footprint, and just for those 3 times a year, we can plan an offsite. On those specific events, we can go ahead and do that. It becomes a special event, and I save in real estate. So utilization data comes into play there. And that same thing then you start enabling transformation. So not only do I can look rear view and see what's taking place, but now I want to forecast going forward. With a tool like Robin, I can see Brendan and his team are coming in on Tuesday. I can understand what's taking place there. One of the biggest problems people have is, I have 50 people in on Monday and then 500 in on Tuesday. Well, how did that happen? What do I need? And it goes beyond just planning for desk. It talks about planning for network bandwidth. It talks about planning for the cafeteria and the cafe. Are they preparing for people coming in and understanding what's taking place? So that's where you continue to transform. You can then actually get to a really high level of productivity now. This is really experiential oriented information. What's the work style people are doing? What's the employee experience? Your work style might be that you only use the stand-up collaborative spaces because you're moving around the office. I'm an engineer, I might be heads down developing work, but I have to be next to a certain piece of equipment. That's my work style. And finally, you get to the behaviors. How often you come in, what do you want to do? But that is a mapping of how you can use this data. And that's how you can start building upon something that starts off at space utilization, then you start building up to occupancy understanding and analysis, and then you actually get to workplace analysis. And that is building this up to be experiential.
Not to bring everyone back to high school algebra, maybe algebra 2, but I think a lot in the order of operations of things.
Yeah.
I think is the acronym PEMDAS, right? That's like, yeah, right?
I can't remember that. Tell me that.
I can't remember what it stands for, but I just remember PEMDAS. There we go. All right, cool. So they'll be able to help you out at the end of this. But it gives you that framework to say, okay, before we even start you can't just pick and choose where to start, right? You have to build on those foundational elements in order to make sure that the next level is actually going to align with the rest of the equation. So that's what frameworks like this have really helped me with, and it's really easy to come at this problem, especially after all these conversations this week, of saying, oh, I really want to know this one specific element of how can we track that? And if you don't have the foundational structure or everyone internal is aligned on the same measurements or tools or anything along those lines, you are just going to be chasing something that you can never actually answer. And so this is actually a way to put it into a framework so that you can continue to build on it and turn it again into a strategy as opposed to a destination. Like
as those advocates for the client, you can go to HR. You can say, look, is your goal you're trying to improve productivity? This is the data we need to help build this up for that. And this is a practical implication. Keep in mind, this is not one size fits all. This is one. The second thing is I couldn't find the right sourcing. I think this was from Cushman and Wakefield. I had to I think that was the right source I found it as an example of taking place. But what I'm getting at is you could build a data pyramid, and this is how you can leverage this to get these higher orders of things. I'm talking to you about experience. We're talking about this, and you're like, that's great, and you have to bring this home and make it practical. Here's a data model to help you think about that and understand how you can utilize this analytics. All right, so this last one is kind of, we have 2 more here. This is kind of a best practices in implementation. I'm sorry that it probably doesn't come up well in the room and probably better online right now. This is available in the ebook, and you guys can download this, and we'll give you the link to this afterwards. But it just kind of gives you a functional step-by-step by some of the framework we just set up for you, right? So talking about rooms and desk reservation was one of the foundational ones. If you're trying to help it make it easier for people to find coworkers, make sure you look to implement something that shares live views of where people are available, or actually that have mapping of the physical furniture in the space also, so you can have orientation and context taking place around there. If you're dealing with policy management, make sure that, one of the incorporated best practices we see is provide the managers with the opportunity to control what's taking place. I'm on a 4-floor organization. One of the policies I would put in place is I would only have my marketing team be able to book on the 3rd floor, so that I develop a clustering or a hive mentality where they're working together, what's taking place. And there's other ones we built out along the way as well too. For analytics and insights about forecast demand, leverage where the employee programmable schedules create more information. One of the great, I think, advantages you guys offer in market, you have a really powerful end user experience. Mm-hmm. It's a pleasure to use the mobile application to tell people. Once you get that buy-in, you now create this network effect of you get this great data coming in because it's employee submitted to what's taking place, right? It's not me mandating saying, Brendan, tell me when you're going to be in the office. You're like, I want to know when Craig's in so I can get my basketball back from him.
Exactly. Well, even to bring it back to the needs of things like wayfinding and where things are in the office, I take a step back and what we've heard as well is thinking about that employee experience as kind of that end goal.
Yeah.
Again, going back to high school, no one wants to feel like they're walking into the cafeteria again and they don't know where to sit for lunch on the first day because they're the new kid and things are moving around or it's a different group of people that are in the office that day.
Yeah.
Some of those social comfort cues of just knowing where things are, or I know where Craig is, I don't have to run around like a crazy person trying to find them, right? And so just making it comfortable and easy for me to say yes in order to go back to the office and use it as a resource, feel welcome, feel informed, feel like I have the right visibility that I need, that I'm a part of this team mentality. Like that's one of those big social elements that's not, it goes beyond those foundational pieces like reservation systems and things that we were talking about earlier. And that's a way to progress that story forward.
I don't know if you realize this, but you were describing elements of culture there. And when we're challenged with people saying, we need culture to drive people in, you just described a self-populating element of culture, and that's how it winds up developing. Again, a whole nother topic we can delve into later, but you see how these type of platforms can help develop hybrid work strategies that are self-fulfilling and create a network effect. It's fantastic. Anyway, this is in the ebook if you guys want to get information on this. But so for the customers or if you're talking to your clients, here's a really simple 5-step process to get through this. We're doing okay in time, right?
I think
okay, good, perfect. We'll have some time for Q&A then. The very first thing when you're talking to these customers, make them realize it's not set it and forget it. Hammer that home, knock it in their heads politely, and let them understand that this is not a one and done process, right? Hybrid work, this also speaks to the idea that hybrid work isn't the destination, it is a tool in the process here. And like most tools, you're gonna continually use it and continually evolve it. The other thing is get in sync with who your new stakeholders are. So a lot of teams in 2020 were developed that were called return to work teams, and it was these type of stakeholders, HR, facilities, corporate real estate, along with IT. Those people are still going to be key drivers of requirements of what takes place. Micah asked me this earlier, and I'm still seeing IT is kind of the tip of the spear of the buyer of what's taking place, but they're accountable by requirements to HR, by facilities, by corporate real estate. Facilities and corporate real estate is a more mature relationship than HR driving requirements in here. But the fact that you have these platform and tools now that can help collect employee sentiment, correct information, allows HR to be an equal footing at the table as well too. So take full advantage of that. Do the same thing that we did. Go out and interview and poll the line of business leaders, where the rubber hits the road, the feet hit the street, understand their needs and their concerns that's taking place. Because there's nothing worse than having a policy implemented and that person saying, yeah, but that doesn't work for me, so I'm just gonna do it my way. You really need to get these guys as stakeholders built in. And it's not a difficult process to implement. It's regimented, but that is a key element to help your clients, your customers have success in this process. Help them get advocates within the field by interviewing their line of business leaders. The next one is create a playbook, the step-by-step guide, but make sure you leverage your technology partners. You have people like Rob, and you have hardware vendors, you have other people, VergeSense was here and stuff like that. These people have great resources. Take full advantage of it. A lot of it's free. I mean, take advantage of what they have to implement and offer. And a lot of these people have figured out also how the technologies and the services integrate well through APIs or through whatever else taking place. But make sure that playbook, that step-by-step guide that you're going to be going through, incorporates those partners. Make them early in the process and take full advantage of it. And then the other one is, we kind of talked about this, hammer home the need to iterate. Have a playbook, have a plan, execute it, measure, adjust. Have a play, measure, adjust. Have a play, measure, adjust. And keep moving this iterative process along. This is what's important to keep this going forward. This is why this could be a standalone role within an IT department to manage the hybrid work. But I mean, it's an ongoing requirements process, just like it might be for around network needs or corporate real estate needs or things like that. So that's a hammered home, pretty simple, high level, but it works in terms of trying to get this across. You know, remember the framework, 3 Ws, workplace, workforce, workflows. Give them a 5-step process to walk them through this. Wow them with all this data and borrow other people's data so like you're like, I know what I'm talking about. And then go to the next part of implementation. Make sense?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Craig.
Yeah. So if you guys want to stay in touch with me, there's a barcode there. You can scan it. It has all the social links and everything else. Or you can go visit waynehouse.com. But I think we have time for questions.
Yeah, probably 2-3 questions. Yeah.
Perfect.
Anybody on the floor?
Go ahead. That's fine.
Hello. So I liked the slide you had around workplace experience and your kind of hierarchy of needs, and I was curious to know if what would you put as the next layers, you know, above it. So at the moment the top one I think was communication.
Right.
If you know, maybe we're not at that point yet, but maybe next year, or what would you do? What would be the next layers?
It's interesting that you talked about that. There's a couple of ways you can think about this. One, what we talked about takes place within a corporate environment, right? This is what we would do. I am Acme Gaskets. This is what we're doing here. You guys alluded to in one of your earlier sessions. What if we take that same context idea of awareness and share that with organizations that work with each other? So then you start creating this opportunity for people to understand place and time around somebody that I do a lot of business with. So I do a lot of business with Microsoft. If I knew who was in town, I'm based out of Austin, from Microsoft, I might be able to forge a face-to-face meeting versus something else. Now, there's a lot of privacy and concern issues and shared information, but we already have federated applications and programs right now. Instant messaging is federated between organizations, and there's some level of protecting. So there seems to be an opportunity to do that, expand the ocean. I'm trying to think about where to dive deeper into that, because I think that higher level is, I don't think many people have reached there yet. I think there are some, and they are great case examples. I think there's a lot of people need to still get there at that point in time. So I don't know, do you have ideas above and beyond that?
No, not yet. Honestly, my head is still spinning from trying to get everyone on that 2.0 route. Yeah. But I think examples like you were saying of things like that Slack Connect, or how do you get, now that you've identified the needs for your organization, how do you make sure that your friendly organizations or your partners and things like that can also benefit from the hybrid strategy of having a distributed workforce that's available at any time, or they might be in different locations, or the relationship between a company and where they're located and where they get their work done is kind of broken. So what does that unlock?
Oh, actually, I do have an idea for this, and this is a learning from another adjacent area. Customer experience is one that's applying a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning, predictive capabilities taking place in there. I think this space might be ripe for something along that lines too. So in a call center environment, you call in, I've got all the context pulled towards me of when I talked to you last, what was the sentiment, were you happy, did you hate it, whatever else. That could be really powerful also in this workplace experience, because we're talking experience again. So give me more context. And so there might be some wrapper elements that can go around this as well.
That's kind of all the time we have, but I just want to thank, I know.
Come on up
Keep
and
going.
ask us plenty of questions.
I just want to thank Craig and Brendan for the panel this morning. And
Great.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, everybody.
Really appreciate it.
So,